Welcome to CERT CON 2021, the virtual conference, where we are celebrating you, the everyday CERT. Thank you for joining us at the 10th CERT conference in the National Capital Region and our first conference on a virtual platform. We are thrilled to have attendees from our own neighborhoods, neighboring counties and states, states in different time zones, and several international attendees. Welcome to each and every one of you. We are here to celebrate you. This is the 10th CERT conference in the greater Washington, D.C. area, an achievement that is a product of a lovely collaboration among multiple CERT programs in the area. We now call ourselves the National Capital Area CERT Consortium. The various CERT programs rotate hosting the conference. Fairfax County is honored to host this conference. My name is Anita Vandermerwe. I am the Fairfax County CERT Training Officer and the CERT CON 2021 Planning Lead. If we were in person, this is where I would be pointing out the emergency exits, the shelter-in-place procedures. Since you are interested in emergency and disaster preparedness, is it safe for me to assume that you've already established those protocols for the space that you chose for your conference experience? Good. I do have a couple of housekeeping announcements, though, that pertain to the virtual environment. Attendees will be muted for this session. And for your best visual experience, we recommend that you set your Zoom setting to speaker view. If you do get disconnected from the session, you can always rejoin us from the attendee hub. And now it is my privilege to introduce Missy Tuttle. She is the president of the Fairfax County CERT Volunteer Association, as well as the CERT CON 2021 conference lead. Missy.
Thank you, Anita.
Can you tell us a little bit about the theme for this year?
It would be my pleasure. So being a CERT is not just the shirt. It's who you are at all times. It shows your instinct to help others without expecting anything in return, in the way you process your surroundings that allow you to quickly adapt to changing environments and situations, in your desire to continually refine your skills and knowledge, as well as your need to grow beyond your comfort zone. Being a CERT is who you are, not a role you play when needed. You, the everyday CERT, is who we're celebrating today. We're celebrating this CERT Con and 9 others. We're celebrating self-appreciation and awareness, program recognition, being asked to participate or serve, and community recognition. We're celebrating you, our attendees. We're celebrating everyday events and occurrences, knowing when to make that 911 call, and more importantly, knowing how to prevent it. We're celebrating responding appropriately and confidently to emergency situations when called to do so. We're celebrating CERT, basic training, advanced training, training instructors, community service, being prepared, community readiness, and response and resilience. At this time, it would be my pleasure to introduce to you Jeff Katz. Jeff Katz is the volunteer liaison of the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department. He spent 24 years working for New York City. Hello, come on in. Spent 24 years working for New York City, running a geotechnical section. While working for New York City, he spent over a year at the World Trade Center site from 9/11 on. In 1997, he became a volunteer firefighter and EMT. In 2007, he dragged his family here from New York to Fairfax. He resides here with his lovely wife, Roberta, his 2 sons, Jason and Adam, who are also both trained EMTs. Roberta works for Fairfax Fire and Rescue as well. They truly are fire and rescue family. Jeff?
Good afternoon. I'm Jeffrey Katz, the volunteer liaison for Fairfax County Fire and Rescue. As a volunteer liaison, I am the link between the Fire and Rescue Department and the 12 volunteer departments in the county. I am also the program manager for the Fairfax County CERT program. In 2003, my predecessor, Robert Miser, along with Dana Powers, helped establish the CERT program in Fairfax. They needed someone to develop the program, so they tasked a former volunteer chief and current county instructor named Rowan to take the program and make it better. You will meet Derek later in this session. What started as a simple 30-hour class that was given 6 times a year has now grown into what you see here. A volunteer-led organization that can teach 200 to 300 people a year on how to protect themselves, their family, and their neighbors in case of the big one, whether it's natural or man-made. But I don't need to go into the details of what CERT is since you're all part of the CERT community. What I can tell you is that some of the major accomplishments would not have been possible without the help of all the CERT volunteers. Since its introduction into the Fairfax County, Fairfax CERT has taught over 4,500 people using both county and volunteer instructors. Barring a pandemic, we've had the capability to hold 6 to 8 basic CERT classes per year at the Fire and Rescue Academy, as well as an unlimited number of basic CERT classes at outside venues. We also have the capability to hold over 50 other exercises and classes per year in additional CERT-related subjects, such as CPR, AED, Stop the Bleed, radio communications, incident command, traffic and crowd management, and many, many more. During any given year, we have between 300 to 400 CERTs who partake in these programs. As you know, we are always looking to get the word out and bring more people into the CERT tent. Our outreach team is a group of over-the-top volunteers who are more than ready to meet with other organizations and groups to get the preparedness word out to the public. The past year or two has shined a spotlight on just how important preparedness is. We have the devastating fires in California and the West. We've had a total power grid failure in Texas. And we've also had the hacking of the Colonial Pipeline recently, and of course, the global pandemic. CERT has never been more important or valid than it is today. The pandemic has been very challenging for all of us. We have worked together to come up with ways to continue our mission despite the restrictions. Fairfax County CERT has accomplished an incredible amount during the last year. First, the basic mission of the CERT program has remained the same, to teach as many residents as possible the basic CERT curriculum and to make them more prepared. The instructors were able to adapt the program to a partially virtual class and were able to continue the basic training. Also, utilizing the virtual classroom, the instructors were able to continue offering some of these extra classes. And in some classes which cannot be done virtually, were still done safely in person while following proper distancing protocols. I can gladly say that there were not a single known case of COVID infection due to our classes. The volunteers have also created the Fairfax County Volunteer CERT Association, which will assist in funding of the Fairfax County CERT program now that USC funding is going away, even though the fire chief has said that the Fire and Rescue Department will help the CERT program live on. We also now have something called the CGM, the CERT Green Machine. It's an old canteen unit donated to us by the Centerville Volunteer Fire Department, and a group of CERT volunteers have totally overhauled the unit and is now ready to serve multiple missions within Fairfax County. And finally, in response to the pandemic, we were able to assist in over 50 food distributions, distributing more than 2,500,000 pounds of food, as well as making hundreds of trips to supermarkets and pharmacies for those who could not. We also have had CERT volunteers at multiple venues, such as vaccine centers and other COVID-related venues. I would like to finish by saying thank you to all the CERT volunteers from Fairfax and the National Capital Region who have worked tirelessly to present this 10th annual CERT Con to you. We have over 40 CERTs right now behind the scenes, setting up lectures, giving lectures, hosting and moderating the chats. Without these volunteers, none of this would have been possible. Now, good part. I'm honored to be able to introduce Fire Chief John Butler of the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department. Chief Butler came to us almost 3 years ago in the fall of 2018. At that time, he had been the fire chief of Howard County for 4 years, where he had risen through the ranks and held many positions in the department. It's actually interesting to note that as a battalion chief, one of his duties was to oversee their CERT program. So Chief Butler came to us with good knowledge of our program and has always been very supportive of our goals and missions. He's made many positive changes since taking over as fire chief in the county, and it really has been a pleasure to work with him, or should I say for him, these last several years. So will you all please welcome Fire Chief John Butler.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you all, and I wish I could be there with you in person. However, last night, my oldest daughter got married, and today they asked that I help kind of clean up the place. It was a backyard wedding. It's a beautiful wedding, but as you know, what wedding venues look like the morning after. So I had to be in person in Maryland to help with that. Nonetheless, I'm with you as much as possible in person, but definitely 199% in spirit and engagement and on the same page as you all. It's such an honor to be here today. And as was said earlier, CERT is not just a shirt. I like that. I like that quote, and it's so spot on with the CERT program in the National Capital Region for the time I've been here. Like Jeffrey said, I have a rich history and knowledge and appreciation and respect for the CERT program from the early days of me teaching it on Saturday mornings in Howard County, Maryland, when it was a novel concept and had kind of migrated over to the East Coast from other places. Y'all's commitment to continuing education and training, emergency and disaster preparedness is overwhelmingly positive. Such a great thing. I saw the mobile unit that was spoken about yesterday at a recruit school graduation before I headed off to the wedding, and that's an impressive piece of work. The unit's being refurbished and put back together, and it's you can tell it's a lot of pride and labor of love and passion to put that unit together, and I'm really proud of it. The National Capital Region CERT, like has been said, has been around here for 10 years, and 3 times has been hosted here in Fairfax. That's impressive, and I'm really proud of that. With over 4,500 members trained to date since 2003, that too is noteworthy. Although it's been said a few times about the COVID pandemic year ongoing, because it's not over. It's not. It wasn't a 12-month year per se. It continues to some extent. But over the last 14 or 15 months, I had the distinct pleasure of seeing the CERT team in our area serve at food distribution centers, grocery, neighbor grocery and pharmacy shopping, traffic and crowd management, as well as COVID vaccination clinics. It's been really an honor and a pleasure. I know these words get thrown around quite a bit. An honor and pleasure for me as the fire chief with a relationship with CERT and the 12 volunteer companies in Fairfax County. Just the interwoven collaborative effort to work alongside those career or paid firefighters and EMTs, the CERT volunteers and the operational volunteers of the companies. They bring this value to our county that we couldn't have if it was a monolithic, just all career department. We need each other. We're all in this together. And most importantly, it wouldn't be possible without, the everyday CERT. The everyday CERT, not the noteworthy, remarkable, notable pandemic or earthquake or hurricane, but the everyday CERT that focuses on emergency and disaster preparedness, and evangelizing what we do, and really appreciating and understanding that they are an important part of what we do. So I'm really happy to be here and really proud of all of you. And thank you all for having me and giving me an opportunity just to say a few words. I'll be around throughout the program, and I might interject at times, but I appreciate you all for having me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chief Butler, for being here. Congratulations to your daughter, and get back to work. Hello, my name's Dana Powers. I'm the CERT administrator for Fairfax County, and I'm here to introduce someone very special to our program. Derek Rowan is the godfather of Fairfax County CERT. He developed the first CERT training curricula, instructor development system, and organizational structure. And it's because of him that Fairfax County CERT is known for their obsession with duct tape. Derek was instrumental in the early days of the CERT movement, providing CERT training to citizens, corporations, FEMA, even international groups. He provided train-the-trainer instructions for area CERT organizations, including Washington, D.C., Arlington, Alexandria, Montgomery, and Prince William counties. Derek took his knowledge and experience as a first responder, fire officer, and CERT training officer and started his own preparedness company, specializing in large-scale exercises, events for governments and around the world. He's actually gone global. We're very pleased to have him here with us today as our keynote speaker. Please welcome Derek Rowan.
I've already broken it. Never trust me. I need some duct tape. They must knew I was coming. They gave me some. So we'll get this set up here. Nope, not up yet. There we go. Look at that. Now we are cooking with gas. Well, thank you very much. In the interest of maintaining, I wanted my own walk-on music. So in the interest of providing accuracy from that extremely flattering introduction, I have to say that Kathleen from CERT Class 9 wrote that introduction for me. So she was very kind to do that. Now, to ensure no conflicts of interest, I do have to admit that Kathleen became my wife. So now I don't recommend any of you CERT instructors out there using that to pick up dates during class. In fact, Dana, was that why you fired me? I'm not sure. Yeah, probably. So I know this is a virtual session and we've already had a brief safety notice, but I do all of my training with a safety notice. It is super important. And here in the room, we do have quite a few people in the room. I have a huge audience that I'm sure you can't see yet. But right now, please take a look around you for your nearest exit. If you are at home, that nearest exit may be behind you, as you know. Now, it does remind me of the last presentation that I made right before the pandemic started. I was at Caesar's Palace last March 2020. I was doing a large presentation to about 500-600 people. And as I'm up there in the stage along this crowd, one of the staff walks up to me right on stage as I'm there, and they hand me a note. So I pick up the note and I open it up, and it says, please evacuate. The building is on fire. Now, I'm not real sure. So I go outside, of course, I evacuate. And as I'm outside, the fire trucks are all arriving. They get there and they start going into the building. And I notice none of the students are actually outside. And I got a little worried and I was thinking to myself, I wonder if that staff person gave everybody a note. You know, I told that story at the first CERT graduation in 2003, and no one laughed then either. But at least we can say that if you see me running, please try to keep up. It's certainly, or at least call 911. Now, we're starting to get back to normal in our training programs here, certainly in Fairfax County and everywhere else around the country and around the world. But I did want to point out the CERT is way ahead of their time. You notice this picture from 2003, we were wearing masks even before it was cool. So CERT is absolutely on top of things. Now, one of the things we didn't get right, I must admit, was the social distancing aspect. We tended to try to put as many people into a room as possible, but you know, what can we do? Now, CERT will always have a soft spot in my heart. When I was asked to give the keynote today, I couldn't think of any better way that I could honor the program, but by coming back and talking about how things started, how far the program has gone in the last 18 years. And I'm sure that's the case because primarily I got out of the way of the progress, like I said, as Dana fired me. But things have gone really swimmingly over as I've looked at it from afar. Now, CERT embodies several core values that I think are super, super important that I want to touch on today. Number one is community, right? Community service. Two, of course, is leadership. 3, lifelong learning. And finally, character. Now, these values and my constant desire to achieve them is actually what got me into volunteering in the first place. In fact, on a warm spring day, it's now been 34 years, I was in downtown Washington, D.C. working, and I was on my way to a meeting when a woman was hit by a car right in front of me. Now, the problem was we all rushed over and we were looking at this woman, but none of us could communicate with her. You see, she was deaf. And all of us stood there absolutely helpless. We didn't know what to do. And there was this overwhelming feeling as we just sat around and watched her bleed. I vowed never again to be helpless in a situation like that before or again. I had to do something. The feeling of actually helping someone cannot be matched. The feeling of providing service to others is something that truly makes you feel good. People are very thankful and appreciative when you help them. Well, except for your kids. But service to others will brighten your day more than anything else. I was very fortunate in my life. That day, 34 years ago, was the start of a career dedicated to helping others. I rode fire trucks here in Fairfax County as a volunteer firefighter and officer for 20 years. Till I got to the point where I needed not just a paramedic to get in and out of the truck, but a pair of knees. I've been an instructor here at the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Academy since 1989. And if you could hit that PowerPoint for me again, Jeff. Thank you. Since 1989, and I vow to bring that style of shorts back that I had then. Now, I've been lucky enough to teach custom preparedness training courses and senior leader design and exercise and practical applications from tactical to large-scale government exercises to the military to EMS to fire to hazardous materials teams to emergency managers to hospitals here and abroad and around the world. I've been fortunate enough to teach in 46 states, 2 U.S. territories, the District of Columbia, 34 partner nations, and I even taught CERT in Japan 15 years ago. In case you can't tell, I love this stuff. Now, volunteering isn't unique around the world. Not far from here, the Virginia Beach Volunteer Rescue Squad says it's the largest all-volunteer EMS system in the country. I'm not sure that's true, but it's an awesome achievement nonetheless. Hatzalah in New York City is probably larger in New York City alone with over 1,000 volunteers, and they're in 10 states and 13 other countries. Other places around the world, you have the Eddy Foundation in Pakistan. They have over 2,000 ambulances, 3 aircraft, 20 boats. They were once listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the largest all-volunteer EMS service in the world. Now, not only do they have ambulances, but they have a morgue. And this portable morgue, according to their website, is required because they have to bury 250 people a month on average who are unclaimed, all by volunteers. You may be familiar with the white helmets in Syria. Their system of volunteering is far from what we have to do, considering the fact that their last reported number was over 300 of them killed. Over 600 have been injured over the years. But CERT here in the United States is very unique. We have trained, according to FEMA, over 600,000 CERT volunteers in the United States alone. And of course, through the efforts of folks like Missy and Anita, who have shown and spread this message far and wide, we've touched many, many more than that. Now, the difference between CERT and many of these other volunteers is that by definition, the CERT responder probably knows their victims. This is a pretty powerful testament to your dedication. You see, on all the calls that I have run in my career, I've never really known any of the people that I've run calls to help. This creates a small but really noticeable emotional difference between your traditional first responder and you, the everyday CERT. In 1995, I was, along with the rest of the Fairfax County Urban Search and Rescue Task Force, was dispatched to the Oklahoma City federal building bombing. For many days, we dug through the rubble, looking for survivors and helping to bring those home to their families that did not survive. The thing that makes this call very memorable to me is not the actual work that we did, but the outpouring of support from the community. Every day at the end of our 12 to 15-hour shift, we would come back to our bunks and we would find a note, a gift, a card from a volunteer, and many from school children. These would break your heart. This one on the screen talks about how thankful he was to us to help him because he lost his friend in the rubble. It seemed as if the entire city was there to help us, not the other way around. Volunteers set up food service areas, a barber shop, supply shops, communication assistants. For you younger folks, this was before cell phones, and counseling services and many more. All from volunteers, all from the community, 24 hours a day for the 2 weeks we were there. The thing is, they didn't realize that they probably comforted us more than we comforted them. In the years since, I've realized that I've been on way worse calls than that, but yet the thing that is strongest in my mind is the emotional attachment that I have to the volunteers and the school kids. I used to think that volunteer firefighters or firefighters in general or EMS persons or police officers, couldn't show emotion or cry. But emotion is the very thing that makes us human. We're not robots. That is exactly what makes a good volunteer. Now, I don't want you to confuse having emotions with being distraught and having indecision or inability to act because you're too, just emotionally involved. No, actually the opposite. Use that emotion to want to do better, to want to ensure the safety of your family, your fellow neighbors. There's plenty of time to cry after the call. You've heard it many times. Who's the most important person in the CERT system? When I taught firefighter school, I would have my students scream this point. And in the CERT program, I underlined and underscored and bolded this point continuously through all the early classes. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. We all have them. We are all human. We know our neighbors, but in order to help them, we must protect ourselves. Otherwise, we're no good to anyone. One of the most important concepts of the CERT program is to reduce the number of victims that need services. To emphasize that order of operations, I would ask every class to raise your hand if the most important person in their life is in the classroom with them. Very few people did. It was a class comprised mostly of strangers. This worked well one day until we did a class in South County, Mount Vernon area, and I asked that question all smug because I'd asked it, a dozen times before, and every single person in the class raised their hand. I'm like, oh yeah, this was a special class for all married couples. Don't. But what I do know is that this conference is for CERTs all over, but I thought it may be helpful because I get asked all the time about the history of the Fairfax County CERT program. In 2003, I was asked, as was mentioned earlier, by a call from the Fairfax volunteer liaison at the time, Bob Miser. He, of course, worked for Dana Powers, who's still with us today, as you met earlier. And he basically said, hey, I volunteered you to teach the first Virginia state CERT Train the Trainer program. My first comment to Bob was, I didn't realize your title was not volunteer liaison, but voluntold liaison. And then my second comment was, thank you for thinking of me. I'm kind of proud of the fact that you thought of me. I've, done a few train the trainer programs in my day. That's pretty awesome. But I have one question, Bob, and what's CERT? Now, he put me in touch with the state of Virginia person at the time. I believe her name was Heather, and he assured me she has all the answers to the program. So I called her up and I was super excited to chat. This seemed like a pretty cool thing. And I asked her, I said, do you have a train the trainer curricula? And her answer was no. And I'm like, okay, I got it. So I'm assuming then that everyone that you want to go through, the course, am I going to teach them just how to teach? Or am I going to teach them how to teach CERT specifically? And she answers both. I'm like, all right, I got it. I think I got it. So then I'm assuming that everybody who's going to take the course has already taken the CERT program. And her answer was no, they have not. I'm like, I got it. So for folks that may not remember, the original CERT curricula in 2003 was 19 and a half hours. And so I'm talking with her on the phone and I go, okay, I got it. So 19 and a half hours, we'll teach them basic CERT, then we'll teach them a train the trainer, sort of how to teach kind of thing, and then how to teach specifically the CERT program. I'm doing the math, carry the one. That's going to be probably, 35 hours or so of training. And there was this long pause and silence on the other end of the phone. I'm not sure if she had done the math. And she goes, well, we've already scheduled it and it's 2 days, 16 hours. That's what you got. So say what? So I call Bob up. I'm like, Bob, you're killing me. His answer was, if it were easy, we would have already done it. Fair enough. So to Bob and Dana's credit, they gave me full reign to develop this original Train the Trainer course and then the first CERT 1 curricula. I examined the curricula and the materials as provided by FEMA. This is the actual first manual, June 2003, that we received from FEMA. And I realized pretty quickly for our needs in Fairfax County, this curricula is insufficient. The training time was insufficient, did not have the time required for needed retention. It was relatively low in application to allow time to absorb and so on. And there was some emphasis, I thought, on the wrong items. So they let me design our own. It was 32 hours in length, included CPR AED in its original incarnation, enhanced practical skill applications, and a much greater emphasis on leadership. We quickly discovered that the practical application of household materials was going to be super important to this course based on our target audience and target methodology and what they were trying to accomplish and what the goal was. And so we emphasize, decking material, wall studs, bricks, drywall, carpeting, blankets, cardboard, and other various common debris in disasters, not to mention the most common of all, duct tape. We've also discovered, and the students discovered themselves, innovative uses for even common hygiene products. Now, we also developed a team spirit, frankly, all around the food. For those that know me, it's all about the food. So we sat and we had lots of volunteers and we had a constant extravaganza of feeding that went on in the early years. I gained 22 pounds. It was awesome. And for those that know, I also have a bit of a sweet tooth, so we had to have cake all the time. So we absolutely love cake. Now, when we developed the course, I also, of course, had to make it a bit easier in some of that curricula. And that's where we came up with the CALMER acronym and the SAFE acronym and so on. Calm was actually the original CERT 2 incarnation, and Calmer came out by one of the early instructors, Mike Forgy. He added the R there at the end in about 2005, 2006. Now, by the end of CERT Class 1, we had already developed and had 3 points of contacts for 3 Fairfax County CERT teams, the Herndon CERT, the Clifton CERT, and the GMU CERT. We had contacts for all the various jurisdictions so that as new members came in, starting with CERT 2, they could align with one of those teams or start their own. We also wanted to ensure increased practical applications, right? I wanted a disaster every night. Now, we took these practical applications pretty early and started them. In fact, we introduced noise, and probably by the second evolution and the third evolution, we even started smoke and emphasized the 6 sides of the box. Look up for hazards, look all the way around, recognize them. By 2006, we had a field operations guide that we were distributing to members to make it a little bit easier, the domain name that you still use today, and of course, volunteer instructors, where we developed the level 1, 2, and 3 certification levels at that time, as we called them. In 2008, we were asked to participate in an exercise called Capital Shield. Now, before then, everyone asked the CERT team to be victims, actor victims. This was no different. The Army called up and says, we'd like the CERT team to be actor victims in this large exercise. I refused. I said, we will only participate if we play. If you treat the CERT team like the CERT team is supposed to be utilized in this kind of event, once we heard what the scenario was, then we can provide some extra folks as victims. They agreed. We introduced our CERT 3 people, our leaders, and so on into that environment, and then we became integral parts of that exercise moving forward. Now, one of the reasons I changed the standard ICS terminology to the Calmer and SAFE acronym was primarily to ensure that we made people comfortable as leaders. Why do you think we spent so much time on leadership? Well, disasters are scary places. And for the victims of disasters, they're even scarier. CERTs are expected to be a rescuer at the same time that they are maybe a victim. It's been said that the worst place to have a fire is across the street from the firehouse. And this is primarily because the firefighters can't think in time, get their game plan together, determine who is going to do what in the time frame leading up to that fire that's just across the street. If you've never been in the fire service, it may seem that fire truck going down the road with the sirens on is very, very distracting to those inside. In fact, it's not. That's where the game plan happens. The OODA loop is a military style decision-making process developed by an Air Force colonel named John Boyd. It was originally designed for combat missions, and this has been a very successful process that has been implemented across law enforcement, business, firefighters, even lawyers. It's a useful tool for CERT as well. The simple version is, observe what's going on, determine how to orient that data, take that data in, what are my courses of action, then decide on that course of action in a thoughtful, meaningful way, and then act upon it. This reminds me of a story when I was a small boy in southwestern Pennsylvania. We had an all-volunteer fire department. And there was a small manufacturing plant that we had in town. You may have heard this story. It became world famous. And there was a fire in this manufacturing plant. And as the volunteer firefighters arrived, they got there, and the CEO of the company came out and says, I'll offer you a $50,000 reward if you can save our secret formula files or whatever he had that's in the vault inside the burning building. Firefighter says, no need for the reward. This is our normal job. They start to attack the fire, and they're going along and attacking. And after a while, it's not working. CEO comes out and says, I'm going to double the reward to $100,000. The local volunteer fire chief there, commander in charge, says, listen, we need some additional assistance. So they called for a local, very small rural volunteer department that was about 25 miles away to come and assist. In the distance, you could hear the siren as that fire truck rounded the bend toward that call. There was a big, long downhill to get to that plant. And as they're coming down the hill, they are screaming, going fast, almost a bit too fast. They break through the police barricade. They actually drive the truck right through the front door. You can see them jumping off, and they were moving with speed and agility like our volunteer firefighters have never seen. They put that fire out in no time and came out with the secret files. CEO walks up to the fire chief and says, I am so impressed. I've never seen anything like that. I'm going to double that reward to $200,000. Thank you for your service. Local media was there and asked that fire chief and says, what are you going to do with all that money? And the fire chief says, well, I'm going to get the brakes on the truck fixed first. That's the first thing we're going to do. Now, CERTs don't have the luxury, like that volunteer fire department, to think about what they are going to do. They're just thrown in the proverbial fire. If you think about it, and a disaster happened right now that impacts your home, neighbors, and neighborhood, what are you thinking? I bet you're thinking of the F word, right? If you had a disaster right now, your home, your neighbors, your family, I know I'm thinking of the F word. Fear. Come on, that's not what you thought I was going to say, is it? Now, my goal with that early Fairfax County CERT program was to change the word fear into something we all understand. WTF. Say it with me. What's the fuss all about? Yeah, this disaster is bad, but hey, I can get through it. I know how to take control. Now, we want you to start thinking this way in that early training because we know hope is not a strategy, right? And we spent a lot of time in the CERT program, especially in those early days, developing leaders. There was a different incident commander, different accountability person, different medical leaders, rescue leaders, logistics, and they changed for every evolution because remember, we had a disaster every night. On the screen is one of our best leaders that we had in those early days. You see her there on the left. Her call sign was Mensa. She was one of our Explorer classes filled with bright high school students, and she was one of our best leaders. She could fill any role: calm, cool, collected, decisive, organized, detail-oriented, character without reproach. In fact, she was the incident commander for the large full-scale final exercise for the 3 classes of CERT 8, 9, and 10. We had lots of call signs throughout the years as we built that camaraderie with the system. There next to Mensa is, believe it or not, her name was Papa Bear, was her call sign. I have no recollection on why she was called Papa Bear. If I saw her on the street, I wouldn't remember her name other than Papa Bear. And we had names from Hawkeye to Shaggy and a variety of others because we celebrated the things that these CERTs brought to the program. Now, one of our famous things that I actually ended up teaching in various places of the world was what we call the world famous cat stretcher. This was from one of our CERT members, call sign Cat, and she built this stretcher using, of course, as you can see, 2 metal chairs. And we did lots of tests with this. This would hold easily 200 pounds without any problem. It does not look as strong as it really is and could be put together in just a few minutes. Now, the tenacity and the ingenuity of CERT members is something that's super important. And our goal was to build that community early and to set the tone for the culture of preparedness, respect, and character for all of our members and our instructors. We developed our instructor corps early because there's no better way to retain information than if you have to teach it. In fact, here is a class that was taught by all volunteer CERT instructors. Specifically, that's the title slide that I screenshotted there. We had a good group. We would also ensure that each of the volunteer instructors got a little something fun that the average CERT student could not get, sort of to keep them coming back. And that was a ride on the Fairfax County helicopter. Here you are as Jim Raba there as the mock victim, CERT class number 2. He was teaching this day, and during that full-scale exercise, he got a ride on the Fairfax County helicopter, which there was a bit, as you can imagine, a bit of competition for that as the classes went on. Now, we wanted to ensure that there was enough repetition that there would be retention, but also in a realistic environment. We emphasize having our CERT members eventually working side by side with their police and their fire and rescue counterparts. We know that CERT would be there first, probably for quite some time. But at some point, they would need to transfer that command or work side by side. So we constantly practice that as best that we could. Now, this is a critical point. At home right now, you probably have your CERT certificate, whether it's hanging on a wall, whether it's in a book. I want you to take a look at it in the future on a fairly often set of recurring circumstances and basis. And I want you to not think of that as an accomplishment, but a license to learn more. Place it somewhere conspicuous. Ask yourself, what can you learn or practice today? How often do you run through scenarios in your mind? How often have you worked with your other CERT-trained neighbors? If you don't have any other neighbors that are trained in CERT, why not? Why have they not gone through the class? Stand up, tell them, advertise it, make it happen. We'll come to you. It's okay to not know something when you go through these scenarios. In fact, whenever you realize you don't know something, it gives you a roadmap to want to learn more. The more you realize you don't know, the more you'll learn. Remember that in the old days, it used to be handshakes and business cards were the most important things before a disaster. With the pandemic, we call them fist bumps and phone numbers. But the concept is still the same. Meeting someone for the first time at the command post is too late. The t-shirt and vest is not enough. Keeping your mind in the game and constantly learning are the keys to improving yourself. What have you learned today about first aid, preparedness, hazard recognition, or command? Train like the life of you and your family depend on it, because maybe one day it will. When my daughter was 15, she used to tell me how stupid and ignorant I was as a father. This May, she just graduated college, and we were talking about life and her first job that was upcoming. She goes, "Dad, wow, you've really learned a lot in the last 5 years." And I have this thing with instructors and leaders who can't say, "I don't know." Instructors who think they're the smartest people in the room are always wrong. CERT members come from all walks of life with some of the greatest life experiences around. For those that are CERT instructors, use the team. The famous quote, "None of us are smarter than all of us," is incredibly relevant in the world of CERT. All of us should endeavor not only to learn more, but to teach others. Become a leader in your CERT program. Encourage more dialogue. Encourage and volunteer for more training. You've proven that by being in CERT CON in general. Ask yourself who in your class that you went through is not taking this training. Communicate with them, talk to them. But leadership and service to your community come with a great responsibility to not only lead, but to help others through their mistakes. I remember a CERT extinguisher class that I taught a long time ago, probably around 2005. And as I was teaching the class, one of the students was kind of struggling with some things, et cetera. And he was a former military person. And I said, well, this works, think of it like a hand grenade, right? Pull the pin and then put the extinguishing agent on the fire. And that was the sort of the key that he needed to get through over that hump to pulling that pin first, right? So as it was his turn to come up, he came out there and he was wasn't sure what to do again. He tried squeezing, nothing happened. And I whispered over, Remember, like a hand grenade. Great burst of confidence. He pulled that pin and then chucked the entire extinguisher right into the fire. Now, I think at the time, Jeff Katz made me pay for that extinguisher, but nonetheless, we got through it, which shows sometimes it is easy as an instructor to make things too complicated. Sometimes the simplest solution is best. I remember once talking with a bunch of school kids, young children, about fire safety. And one of them asked me what the Dalmatian on the fire truck was for. And their instructor, their teacher there immediately took charge of the conversation as a teaching moment and looks at them and starts having the conversation. Well, what do you think that Dalmatian is for? And one of them raised their hand and says, clearly, the dog is to keep the crowds away. Someone else said, no. They want to make sure that it's to good luck. It's good luck for the firefighters, right? And then the youngest, smallest one raises their hand and says, no. That's so they can find the fire hydrant. Remember, sometimes the simplest solution is the best. So how do you move your program forward, especially as a leader and those that are about to become leaders? Trust. Trust is the secret to volunteers. I've been a volunteer leader or instructor of one sort or of another, both in the fire department, outside, various things, for over 35 years. And this trust matrix by Richard Barrett should be required knowledge for all leaders in a volunteer organization. Leaders and instructors learn these traits, live these traits. Those that are not current leaders never tolerate a leader or an instructor that doesn't possess or abide by these traits. Hold them accountable. The CERT system and culture must not allow its leaders to be not trusted by its members. A defense attorney was once cross-examining a CERT. I think this person was from CERT class number 2. He was telling me the story, and it kind of went like this. Apparently the CERT person, witnessed some sort of crime, and I had to go there as a witness in trial. And the defense attorney says, "Sir, did you see my client fleeing the scene?" And the CERT person said, "No, sir, but I subsequently saw a person matching the description of the accused running several blocks away." And the defense attorney says, "Well, who provided this description to you?" And the CERT member said, "Well, one of my CERT team members gave me the description." And the defense attorney says, "A fellow CERT member gave you this description of this alleged offender. Do you trust this fellow CERT person?" And the person on the stand, the CERT member, says, "Absolutely, sir, with my life." The defense attorney says, "With your life?" Well, let me ask you this. Do you have a locker room there at the fire academy where you do your CERT training? And the member says, "Well, yes, sir. Yes, sir, we do." "And do you have a locker in that locker room?" "Yes, sir, I do." "Do you keep a lock on the locker in that locker room?" The CERT member says, "Yes, sir." Defense attorney says, "Well, if you trust this fellow CERT person with your life, why do you find it necessary to keep a lock on your locker?" And the CERT member doesn't miss a beat and says, "You see, sir, we're near a court complex, and there have been several defense attorneys that have been known to walk through our locker room." Now, I tried to model my professional life and volunteer life around trust, character, and integrity. During the attacks of September 11th, I was a volunteer fire chief here in Fairfax County at the Springfield Volunteer Fire Department, also home to our famous Missy. Although she wasn't born yet, this was before her time. She's too young. As many of you remember, the situation obviously was quite uncertain, especially if you lived in the DC area. There was a tremendous amount of confusion, false alerts, incorrect news reporting. We heard car bombings at the State Department, additional aircraft coming in. There was a lot of challenges and confusion going on at that time. We were asked by the county to muster our volunteers for this call. We did so. Before we actually placed units in service, I gathered up all the volunteers at the fire station at the time, and we had enough to fill multiple units. And I made it very clear, you don't have to be here. Your number one priority is to yourself. Your number two priority is to your family. Your crew is third. I cannot guarantee your safety today. And I cannot guarantee your family's safety. No one will think less of you if you go home. We have plenty of people to staff these rigs. Not one person left. Many of us were on units for several days. We fielded 2 engine companies, 2 ambulances, a canteen unit, had staff at the Emergency Operations Center, and staff in the station handling logistics. We had built leaders with trust. Now, being a leader also requires humility. Be humble. Know your limits. I heard a story, don't know if it's true, about Muhammad. I just dropped the clicker. About Muhammad Ali, who was flying on a commercial aircraft. And as the announcement came over to fasten your seatbelts, Muhammad Ali didn't fasten his. Flight attendant walks up and says, sir, you need to fasten your seatbelt. Muhammad Ali, kind of in a gruff tone, says, Superman doesn't need a seatbelt. The flight attendant, without missing a beat, says, Superman doesn't need a plane either. Now buckle up. So if you stumble, pick yourself up. Remember what made you stumble. Look at these mistakes, learning experiences, and remember the famous saying, the only mistakes that are unforgivable are those we repeat. The only challenges that are frightening are those we do not meet. Challenges are opportunities in disguise, and for every challenge, you have an opportunity to rise higher and higher. Every challenge you meet and conquer will spur your confidence and self-respect, and every obstacle you overcome will provide a stepping stone for going higher and higher. But please, as you climb in this wonderful organization, turn around every so often and help that person behind you. A philosopher once said, the true worth of a community can be measured by the character of its citizens. Character, leadership, and service are only valuable traits if you stick to them. Now, I remember a story, and those that have gone through fire school who may be here have heard this from me. But when I was a young officer running a fire engine, this was probably in the early 90s or so, we ran a call, vehicle accident on Interstate 395. And as we're running that call, we were the first arriving engine company to that, and it was on a sort of an uphill slope to that call. And there was a car overturned, someone trapped inside. And as we arrived, we stopped the engine and we noticed there was a lot of fuel coming out of the vehicle. Gasoline was flowing, and it was flowing sort of downhill toward the oncoming traffic. So I had my firefighters start the extrication process, and we had enough crew that I had another firefighter pull a hose line, get it charged in case there was any ignition as we worked through this process. About that time, a Virginia State trooper rolls up. Now, we had this same trooper sort of in a bit of a challenge earlier on. We had run another accident earlier that day, and that gentleman was a bit cranky in things in terms of getting that traffic open. And at one point, I told him, I'm not opening the road. Live with it. He wasn't pleased. Oddly enough, the same trooper arrives during this vehicle accident. He gets out of the car, opens the car door, and if you've ever been stopped by a Virginia State trooper, they all get out of the car exactly the same way. Puts his hat on, tilts it down, turns around, goes to the back of his cruiser, opens up the trunk, pulls out a flare. Walks into the front of his car, straddling the car, sees me over there as I'm looking at him, takes the paper off the flare. Now, what the trooper doesn't realize is there's a stream of gasoline going right down next to him. They're flowing next to his cruiser. Trooper, don't light that flare. Looks at me, looks at his badge, looks at me. Takes the paper off and the striker and gets ready to strike the flare. I go, Trooper, I'm ordering you. Don't light that flare. Trooper looks at me, looks at his badge, looks at his gun, looks at me. Puts his head down, gets ready to start to strike the flare. He takes everything off, pulls his hand up. I tell the firefighter next to me with the charged hose line, hit him. Firefighter doesn't know what to do at that moment. Hit him. He gets it, eyes real big. Puts that clothesline right on the trooper, head to toe, knocks the flare right out of his hands. Now, this story was funnier after I got out of prison. But the idea is stick to character. Ladies and gentlemen, your character and intellectual curiosity is what will drive your future efforts and satisfaction in the CERT program. They matter 24/7. Always remember, you don't have to wear a uniform to wear a cape. And has been told many times before, there are 3 basic truths about public speaking we should all be aware of. People who say it goes without saying eventually say it. People who say unaccustomed as I am to public speaking generally prove it. And people who say in conclusion never conclude. Therefore, you'll be happy to hear that as unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, it goes without saying that this is definitely my conclusion. Thank you very much, and I welcome any comments or questions. I'm here for, I guess, 7 more hours, I think is what the plan is. If you like that, please throw money. If you didn't, my name is Jeffrey Katz. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to introduce to the podium the Wonder Twins.
Oh my goodness, Derek. Oh my goodness. We're speechless. We do want you to realize that we did not forget the lessons you taught us. And to celebrate CERT CON 2021, we're going to get this up here for you. Okay. So Derek, we do have a few extra minutes. Would you mind if our audience was able to ask you some questions?
I'd love it.
Would that be okay? All right, if you'll come on back up, we'll moderate the questions. Thank you so much.
You mean there's questions?
There may be.
I doubt it. They were all sleeping. I mean, if I were there, I'd be sleeping.
Nope, no questions yet, just
See?
accolades.
All right, well, we do have one from the audience here. Can you tell us how you've been able to take this CERT knowledge and turn it into something that you love to do every single day?
Well, great question. So if you didn't hear that, how do I take the CERT knowledge and turn it into something I use and do every day? Easy, right? Intellectual curiosity. Never stop learning, period. I've taken that as heart and to ensure that everything that I do is around preparedness. Definitely goes back to that spring day 34 years ago where I was helpless and I said I will never be that way again. And as such, I've strived as best I can to learn as much as I can, which, you know, admittedly isn't great, but it's, you know, it's gotten me a cool job and a wife. So there you go. Excellent. With that, I don't think there's any other questions.
Actually,
hope
there
it
is one question.
Yes, please.
Is it a conflict of interest to buy more stock now in the makers of duct tape? Ask your girlfriend.
Yeah, so great question. So it is not a conflict of interest. And remember, we only recommend 3M brand. No.
We all have our favorites.
Yeah, we all have our favorites. Never use Gorilla Tape. You can't write on a black tape with black Sharpie. It doesn't work. Ask me how I know.
Another question, how can you get your municipality interested in forming a CERT team when they don't seem to be? It has been over 10 years since we have had one in our area.
Yeah, great question. So what we have found is everybody complains about they have no budget or time, right? That's everybody's complaint. So the answer is you will volunteer to do it, or when I say you, someone has to do it. It cannot be relied on the government, obviously, to handle that. You need a volunteer to do that with that government support, and you can do it with minimal equipment. As you have seen, I'm assuming if you've gone through CERT training, which I'm assuming you have, it does not take a lot of equipment. It is easy peasy lemon squeezy. So the answer is Be that force, volunteer for that force, become that force, and actually own it yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to do all the work, but someone needs to coordinate the work. Hopefully that's a somewhat helpful answer. My experience is, again, no one wants to do it because they think that it takes a budget. It doesn't. Now, we don't have Jeff Katz's money. I mean, who does? But you can certainly start a bit more modest.
Okay, another one. What are the next partnerships you see on the horizon for CERT members to help make across communities?
Great question. So one of the things that we're seeing in nationwide that is really interesting is, and my wife brought this up to me the other day, is the virtual aspect of emergency operations centers, right? So as emergency operations centers have tried or had to work in a much more virtualized component during the last year, more opportunity for volunteers in a distributed model has become apparent. There was that was the hiker that got lost in California, in which the community geolocated him based on just a photograph. And I'm not suggesting that is a role necessarily for you, but it is becoming more obvious that there is a much greater need for remote volunteerism in emergency management writ large. So I see that as the next big avenue for the community emergency response team. Now, that will require a little bit of interaction with your local government to see if they are willing and able to do that. Obviously, Fairfax County is quite, supportive of that program here, and in other organizations, we've seen similar support. For example, I was in Kansas recently, and they use their CERT volunteers very extensively in weather. Now, of course, Kansas has, you may have read about it or saw it in The Wizard of Oz. They have a tornado problem, but they use their CERT volunteers quite a bit for weather aspects, weather observations, weather teaching, radio distribution, maintenance of their sirens, and so on. So those are some areas that I see that may be useful or helpful in the future.
Okay, this is from Alex in Arlington, wants to know how do you explain, can you explain a little further what CERT can do to save lives in a pandemic?
Yeah, so CERT can save lives in a pandemic by being an example, being a leader, right? Absolutely. Wash your hands. We've all heard it since we were young. It works. So be a leader, be an example. Clearly, you can assist with the many vaccination programs that are around. A lot of them, and I'm not familiar in case of Arlington, how they utilize volunteers for that, but I know in many jurisdictions around the country, they use volunteers to assist in a variety of manners in the pandemic or for the pandemic. But education is clearly the biggest weapon and the biggest force multiplier that governments can use with CERT.
Okay, and this is kind of combining two. Somebody from New York said that they've not gone through CERT training. It's not available in our area or surrounding counties in New York. And then somebody else added, a vast amount of the country is rural or rural agriculture with very limited resources for emergency services. Is there a program for partnering successful large CERT communities with rural communities to carry the CERT message and help them establish and grow CERT programs?
Yeah, so I am not familiar. I don't know the answer to that question. I have seen CERT organizations in the Midwest that have specialized a little bit in rural aspects, farming aspects, first response in that area, right? Specifically for accidents with machinery, and getting people trained for that first response, especially in the case of like tourniquets and items for that massive bleed that can happen due to entrapment within machinery. But answering in terms of how they would partner with those larger jurisdictions or area, urban areas, I have not seen. I'm not sure. I'm looking around the room if anyone else knows of anything, perhaps. So my answer is no. The Citizens Corps website from ready.gov certainly may be worth reaching out to FEMA and the Citizens Corps program there to see if they have aspects and communication with anything like that that may be helpful to you.
Okay, now that many of the UASI grants are going away, how do you think jurisdictions could fund their programs?
Yeah, so here in Fairfax County, I think is a great model for that by first off, the development of volunteer instructors, right? Minimizing the cost, which was, as for those that know me, that's all Jeff Katz complained about was how much he had to pay me in the early days. But with the switch over to volunteer instructors, that is obviously a huge savings in terms of that cost. Equipment really does not need to be fancy. You don't have to provide backpacks and all of the other things. And in fact, are we still giving like those crappy goggles out there? Or do we actually get better goggles? Safety. Okay. Yeah. When I say crappy, I meant low quality. You should always have eye protection, of course. Starter kit. That's what we call them. Yeah. So you don't need a lot of equipment, obviously, to get that started. Training can be done anywhere. Our CERT, what we used to call CERT 1, I'm not sure what it's called now, but that community-based CERT training is done with the resources that are there. There is no fancy fire academy that is used for that purpose. It is done right in your neighborhood, community center, house, etc. When I taught overseas, we used office equipment based or whatever the hazard happened to be in that area that we could find. So it is certainly possible to do training, recruitment, and have a CERT program with very, very little money. Now, here in Fairfax, they, of course, have developed their own nonprofit organization to accept donations, and that should be a model across the country, if it's not already, to help raise those funds and awareness and campaign and marketing, et cetera. So the answer to your question is it really doesn't cost anything. It's very little, but you can use that avenue of the nonprofit to raise money should you need.
Okay, this is an interesting question. Next one is in your experience, how does the US compare to the rest of the world as far as CERT training and preparedness?
Yeah, so we are probably leaders in the world in terms of CERT style training. That being said, there are countries that do a very, very good job of training volunteers. Mexico, for example, their FEMA equivalent has a large volunteer cadre for earthquake response, et cetera. Israel has a huge volunteer response with a huge training. Of course, the people that I mentioned earlier, the Eddy Foundation in Pakistan is a huge volunteer organization process. Syria and other countries and Japan, they all have very large, at least places that I have been to, volunteer aspects. The United States system is excellent because we come with a standardized curricula, but we share that with the whole world. People in other countries are always amazed when I point to our national doctrine and just about everything, including CERT, freely available on the websites of the United States government. So it is a model for the world, but there are many volunteers. Australia has another huge volunteer organizational program as well. So we are very good, but we're not the only ones.
Okay. One person just mentioned that as far as volunteering, that as a CERT, he participated with the fire department at COVID testing last summer and COVID vaccination clinics this winter.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Oh, do you think that FEMA is going to keep supporting CERT programs in the future?
Short answer to that is yes. I think it is certainly an important line item for them, citizen preparedness. One of FEMA's missions is preparedness, right? So that is one of their overarching missions that they have, and the whole USA Corps system, Freedom Corps system, CERT being a part of that, is an integral part, right? The United States has a long and proud history of volunteerism, not just in CERT, but in many other national programs, and I do see that continuing. One more question. I've just been given the big hook to pull me off stage.
Actually, there is no more.
Even look at that, it's a perfect
anymore in
timing.
chat. So
perfect timing. Well, thank you all. I do appreciate it. Back to the Wonder Twins.
Thank you, Derek. It truly has been a privilege and an honor for us to have you speak on our CERT program, and wow, speechless, absolutely speechless. So, Anita, let's just regroup after that awesome presentation and talk a little bit more about the 10th anniversary of CERT CON. That was 11 years in the making. It's COVID edition.
I know, the COVID math.
Yeah.
It's challenging. It's really hard for me to just grasp that this is the 10th conference, Would you mind if we kind of take a little journey back in time and just, mention the different hosts, the different themes, what we've done?
I think that that's absolutely appropriate. Well, it all started on June 10th, 2011. Greg St. James, I'm looking at you.
Yep.
So Greg in Montgomery County had this fabulous idea to hold a CERT conference where folks that had been CERT trained could get together to sharpen and advance their skills, to have an opportunity to network, to come together and really just learn from each other. And what a beautiful concept it's been. So they hosted theirs on June 10th through 12th in Montgomery County. I believe that Friday evening, he had this lovely reception, musicians. Saturday and Sunday were filled with these amazing classes. Craig Fugate, if you're out there and you're watching, you were there. I remember, it was amazing.
All right. And then I think an unstoppable force was in motion. So 2012 was a partnership between Georgetown University and Montgomery County. And again, it was in June, a weekend. CERT Anytime, Anywhere was the theme. That was my first CERT Con. I had just graduated my basic class and I got this invitation about a conference and I was like, wow, I have found my tribe and I have arrived. This is the best ever.
That was truly an event. It was held at the Georgetown University campus. Absolutely beautiful venue. My most memorable experience there was the mass casualty exercise that they had. It was just overwhelming. I think I walked away on cloud 9 and shortly after had a conversation with Jeff Katz. And I said, we really need to be a part of this. And he didn't say no. So fast forward to today, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself.
That's right. So 2013, guess who hosted it? Fairfax County. Jeff didn't say no. And well, we won't ask him if he regrets it. We're just going to keep moving on.
And the theme of that CERT Con was
ready, set,
CERT Con! Then our friends in Prince George's County did an amazing job in 2014. Calvin Hawkins and his team just took this energy and this momentum that had been building up for years and delivered an amazing conference. We were truly fortunate to be a part of that one as well.
And that's where I realized the absolute value and depth that it brings with rotating the hosts. So the personality of each program and each community really shone through in every conference, as it was, we all have CERT in common. We all have the same basic foundational training, but how it's implemented, how we're celebrating in our conferences, it's just the best community ever.
Well, isn't it amazing that that's really what CERT is all about, is taking an idea or a concept and making it work in your very own environment. That's truly what makes CERT special. And that's what makes these conferences so unique and so special as well.
That's right. So 2015, we were back in Montgomery County with
beyond expectations.
Oh my goodness. David Steele, I remember when you first spoke those words.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
All right, let's keep going here. 2016.
Back to basics.
We didn't say no.
Oh, that's right. Back to basics. Neighbors helping neighbors.
Yep, we were back in Fairfax County and then on to Prince George's in 2017.
And their theme was emergency preparedness runs in the family.
Yeah, that was a really neat spin. Then 2018, back to Montgomery County.
Learning for life. And those are some of the points that Derek talked about in his keynote. Really having that thirst for knowledge, that desire to learn and grow, to step out of your comfort zone, to continually learn, evaluate, and grow.
And then we invited some new members into our family. So 2019, Washington, D.C. hosted the conference.
And their theme was "We Serve Too," acknowledging the past, valuing the present, influencing the future.
And that brings us to the 10th conference.
Well, that was in 2019. What happened in 2020? We're at 2021.
It's COVID math.
Oh,
Just keep
COVID.
going.
Forgive us. Here we are.
So this is the 10th conference, and we are celebrating you, the Everyday CERT.
So, you know, we've talked about the 10 years of CERT CON. We've talked about the theme, but these words really aren't enough to convey the thoughts and the feelings that we want to. So
You're right. You're right. Watch this.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, hanging on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos of memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life.
And a very special and humbled thank you to Jen St. James for putting that together. Jen, lovely work. Thank you. So before we take a break and go on to the rest of our conference today and tomorrow, there are a few things that we'd like to share with you. So our conference started out Tuesday evening at 6:30, led by Until Help Arrives with who did that for us? They were amazing. Arlington CERT. Arlington CERT did an amazing job. To date, we've had 16 classes for you. We have an action-packed day ahead of us. And tomorrow, if you tune into our opening session, we've got a great surprise for you.
We do.
So any other housekeeping notes that we need to share?
I actually wrote them down. So as we go into break, you can look at those. Mike, if you could throw that up for us. So folks, this concludes the opening ceremony, the main keynote session. You have a break of how many minutes? Oh, you get 6 extra minutes for your break.
All right, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
See you in a session near here.